I struggle with depression. There's no way around that. With every one of my 4 children, I have struggled with some form of postpartum depression. And after this last baby, who is now 2.5, I felt like I had skipped over the depression, and then it has kind of reared its ugly head again, and I have been struggling with it. And I went and was clinically diagnosed. And so I thought I would share with you guys a little bit of my heart right now, because I think there is a part of us that when we are going through something and we feel weak, we want to be on the other side of it before we share or contribute or try and make a video or do whatever it is that we do that gives to the world. And I had some lovely ladies in my Bible study group on Wednesday remind me, and even the sermon this week from church remind me, that it's sometimes not when we're on the other side of something, it's when we're in the midst of it and God meets us there. That's where we find that hope and strength, and sometimes that is what encourages others. So I get on here to say today that if life is not going well for you right now, or you're just struggling to put one foot in front of the other, it might be depression, it might just be a low period, I'm not sure, but I want you to know that you're not alone, that you are seen, and that it is okay. It's okay to not be delivered from the thing you're struggling with right now, but to be in the midst of it. And so I went out for my quiet time a couple days ago. I was out on my back deck and I said, God, I've got nothing. I don't even know what to do for my Bible study that night. I don't even know where to turn for inspiration. A lot of the scriptures just kind of fall flat when our head and our heart is depressed or struggling. And he reminded me of a favorite story in the Old Testament. It's the story of Elijah. My Bible here has a really cool illustration. And it's not the part of Elijah that, if you are familiar with it, that many people remember, where he calls down fire from heaven to light up this altar to prove that his God is the one true God, and that the false gods of Baal were all, fake, that their God could not make fire rain down. That is an incredible, momentous, amazing, miraculous story. But the part that I turn to is the part after all of that has happened, when he's had this literal mountaintop encounter with God, and everything was just so awesome, and God showed up in power, and he just stood for God and his word. And then what follows is a type of deep depression for Elijah. And so I am reading today, and I'm looking in 1 Kings. It tells that whole story of Elijah. I'm in 1 Kings chapter 19. This is Elijah's journey to Horeb. And I'm not sure if that's how you say the name correctly. It's H-O-R-E-B, but that's how I'm going to pronounce it for this video. So I want to read a couple of these passages and talk through what they meant to me. It says, Ahab told Jezebel everything that Elijah had done. So Ahab was kind of an evil king at the time, and Jezebel was the one who really turned the king's heart away from God and convinced him to turn after these false gods and to follow Baal and to do sacrifice and all these things that were really bad. And after Elijah has just proven that his God is powerful, Ahab goes back and tells Jezebel all this, and Jezebel hates him for it in her heart, and she seeks to kill him. So it says, so Jezebel sends a messenger to Elijah saying, may the gods punish me and do so severely if I don't make your life like one of them by this time tomorrow. Meaning that he had actually just put to death all of her prophets that served the false gods. And she's saying, if I don't make your life dead like theirs by tomorrow, may I be punished. And verse 3 is pretty significant, because I think sometimes a low spirit in us is often accompanied by fear. It says in verse 3, then Elijah became afraid and immediately ran for his life. It doesn't matter that just this day before, he had just had this incredible, powerful encounter. He was filled with power for God and had done this amazing thing. But in verse 3, this threat from Jezebel has just shaken him to his core. And we don't always know what it is that will kind of throw us off. I think we think that we're stronger than we are. I realized that I think I had probably struggled with postpartum depression with my last kid, my fourth one. But I think I had been coping. I had been using a lot of coping mechanisms to get through up to this point. And I realized that when we did the home renovation, so if you've been watching the channel or keeping up, we did a whole kitchen renovation and just kind of our whole first floor had to be renovated in many ways. And it wasn't really by choice because we had a dishwasher flood and everything had to be gutted. And it sounded a lot like first world problems, but for me, the renovation went on for months and we didn't have the use of the first floor of our house. And with 4 children, I just struggled. My home didn't feel like home anymore. And a lot of the coping mechanisms I had developed maybe to deal with depression were gone. They were taken from me. And so I found that it actually spiraled me worse and I became afraid and I have struggled. And I also dealt with guilt and shame of feeling bad that is the thing that was making me depressed, because some people would love to have a renovation or love to have some of the things that I have. And I know that, and I know we're so blessed and grateful, but I think that's what makes it even harder, because right now you might be going through something and you may be thinking like, I don't have it as bad as someone else. I know this could be worse. I know I have wonderful things in my life. So why do I feel this way? And it often makes depression even more and more. It's a cycle, it's a spiral. And so for me, just coming to terms and being willing to admit I am not okay, and it's okay that I'm not okay, and I don't have to feel guilty about that, is okay. And so in verse 3, Elijah became afraid, immediately ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba that belonged to Judah, he left his servant there, but he went on a day's journey into the wilderness. So he's kind of ventured out alone. That's interesting there because he leaves his servant behind and he goes on out into the wilderness. And then in the next verse, it says, he sat down under a broom tree and prayed that he might die. He doesn't even want to live anymore. He's so scared and tired and exhausted and depleted. He doesn't even want to live. And he's also alone. I think our first instinct when we are not feeling mentally well is actually to push people away. It's the thing I know I should be doing the opposite of. Just this last week, I was struggling and I was like, do I have women over to my house? I don't really want to be around people. I want to push people away. And I often know that I need to do the opposite of that. The thing that like Satan really wants is to isolate us and make us feel alone. And so I did the opposite of what I felt. I'm learning that my feelings are indicators. They are not dictators, that I can't always trust them. I can't trust how I feel anymore. And so even though I felt like pushing people away, I had them over. And do you know what happened Wednesday? I was so encouraged by the women that came around me. I was so encouraged. And had I pushed them away and said, no, I don't want to have anybody over my house. I can't have group. I can't be around people. I don't want them to see me like this. Then I would have missed that opportunity. And so Elijah, he is here. He's alone. He's in the wilderness. He's vulnerable. But I do love this, that even if other people aren't coming into your life right now to encourage you, God meets him there. God meets him in that alone place. It says, suddenly an angel touched him. The angel told him, get up and eat. I love this. The angel made him food. Sometimes we just need good food and a little bit of rest. He looked, and there at his head was a loaf of bread. Amen for delicious bread. Baked over hot stones and a jug of water. And I actually want to know a little more about this bread because they say in the next few verses, this is the bread that gives him energy to walk for 40 days and 40 nights to Mount Horeb, where he's going to meet God. He eats this bread, whatever kind of bread this is, and that's the sustenance he needs because God knows he's got a journey ahead of him, and he's encouraging him. He's saying, eat, get up, eat, and then rest. So it says he ate and drank, and then he lay down again. He took a nap. Sometimes you do need rest. Sometimes the depression you're feeling could even be just overexhaustion, exertion. Maybe things are taking a lot more out of you than they're pouring back in. And in some seasons, like for me, I have 4 children. I can't cut out my children. I have to be there for them and do the things that they need, but I can find moments of rest or respite. I can ask my husband, hey, can I go take a moment to myself, or go take a walk where I can get myself, mentally in a good place. Or we are so blessed that we have grandparents that step up and help. And you may not be surrounded by family or supportive people, but if you can squeeze in a moment here or there, maybe just, a few minutes at night once they're finally in bed, or something just to rest, to find real rest for your soul. And I think I'm learning lately that there are things I thought were giving me rest that don't. One of them is scrolling YouTube endlessly, not stopping and just maybe focusing on something. It keeps the cortisol level high in our brain. I've read some research recently about that. It kind of puts us in fight or flight mode. We keep scrolling to find the next thing, the next thing, the next thing, to try and release little bits of serotonin in our brains, but it actually depletes us. And so I've purposely said I'm gonna take breaks from that to rest my mind. Let my mind be bored for a few minutes. Let it wonder, let it think about things. So he rests. It says, then the angel of the Lord returned for a second time and touched him. He said, get up and eat, or the journey will be too much for you. So again, he has to eat again. Sometimes when you're depressed, food's not tasting very good. And he's encouraging him, eat and sustain yourself. You've got to eat good nutrition. You've got to fill your body up with the things you're going to need for what's to come. So he got up, ate and drank. Then on the strength from that food, he walked 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the mountain of God. He entered a cave there and spent the night. Suddenly, the word of the Lord came to him and said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? I love this because it's like God asks him this question as almost a reminder of his purpose. He kind of gets to the heart of his fear of, why are you here, Elijah? Why are you in this cave? Why did you come here? Why did you walk here 40 days and 40 nights? I mean, did the angel direct him there? I don't know. Is it his fear that led him there? I don't know. But here he's finally meeting with God, and God saying, why are you here? Why are you here? It kind of gets to that core of, what do you want? And then he replies. He replies in the response of, I've done all these things for you, God, and yet they are looking for me to take my life. He says, I have been very zealous for the Lord God of armies, but the Israelites have abandoned your covenant. He says, like, these people are doing all these things. They've torn down your altars, killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left. He's like, I'm the only one. And they're looking for me to take my life. That's his reasoning he gives God. This is why I'm here. I'm hiding, God. I'm afraid. I've done all these things for you. Why aren't you helping me? I can definitely relate to that. I think that has been a lot of my prayers while feeling depressed of, Lord, haven't I been doing everything right? Haven't I been being obedient in the things you've asked me to? Why am I feeling this way? Why am I going through suffering? Why am I going through this difficulty? Why? Why, God? Why won't you take this cup from me? And the answer has been no right now. And I don't know all the whys, but it's been very healing, I think, to still voice it. God still wants us to pray that to him. Then God says to him, go out and stand on the mountain in the Lord's presence. At that moment, the Lord passed by. A great and mighty wind was tearing the mountains and shattering the cliffs before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. So the first kind of big natural phenomenon happens where the wind is shaking the mountains, and the wind is very powerful. Whatever this wind is, it's shattering cliffs. Okay, if wind is so strong that it can shatter a cliff, imagine like maybe a rock slide or something. That's a pretty powerful phenomenon. I'm picturing, I mean, maybe it was tornado type winds. I don't know. But it says that God was not in that. I mean, imagine you're afraid, right? He comes here out of fear, afraid for his life. And then there's nothing like standing in a natural disaster, like a tornado or a flood or something, to make you even more afraid. It's almost like God is demonstrating, why are you afraid of them? Let me show you how powerful I am. He's standing out there and the wind comes by, but God's not in the wind. And then it says, after the wind, there's an earthquake. So now the earth literally starts shaking. It says, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, there's a fire. So, I mean, all of the like natural disaster elements are here happening. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, there was a voice, a soft whisper. How tender and kind is that? That our God does not come at us he can have huge displays of power, but where does he meet Elijah in his depression? In a soft whisper. And it says, when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle. The mantle would be kind of like a covering of his face. It's almost like being ashamed, like I'm going to wrap up my face. I'm in the presence of the Lord. He hears the whisper. He goes out and stands at the entrance of the cave, and suddenly a voice came to him and said, again, what are you doing here, Elijah? And then he repeats his exact same offer. Like they've done all this and they're coming for my life. They're looking for me to take my life. Then the Lord said to him, go and return by the way you came to the wilderness of Damascus. And he gives him a task. He doesn't address the fear of what the danger is. Yes, they are coming for his life. God doesn't even address that. He doesn't even reassure him of, no, you won't be killed. It'll be okay. He just says, go and do this next thing. He needs him to trust him and put one foot in front of the other and leave this mountain and go do the next thing. And what is so impressive about Elijah is he does. He does. He goes and does the next thing. But here is where I was just blown away and in tears in my devotional the other day. Maybe you are more of a Bible scholar than me. I do not pretend to know everything about this. But I did not realize that Mount Horeb, the place that he went to, I had some cross-references in my Bible, in my footnotes, and I went back and I looked at some other scriptures. And I found out it's the exact same mountain that Moses, so many years before, Moses wandered onto a mountain trying to get his animal that had wandered away, and he sees a burning bush. And he finds out that he is in the presence of God, and he removes his sandals, and God speaks to him out of the fire in that bush. And the fire is not consuming the bush. Guess what mountain that was? That was Mount Horeb, same mountain. And later, when God's people are delivered from Egypt and their slavery and their oppression, and they head out into the wilderness and God is going to give them the 10 Commandments, it is believed that the same exact mountain where God's presence came to dwell and give the 10 Commandments was Mount Horeb. So this mountain, not only does Moses encounter God there, God gives his people the rules of his covenant and his ideas for living. And now Elijah meets God on this very same mountain. Well, what I think is really, really neat is years later when Jesus comes onto the scene, Jesus goes up onto a mountain. I don't believe it's the same one, but they do say it's a mountain. We don't know which one. He goes up onto a mountain for the transfiguration, where God comes and says, this is my son, and I am so pleased with him. Guess who appears at the transfiguration? Moses and Elijah. The two people that met God on this mountain and were in the presence of God and even cover their face. And Moses covers his face because he knows he's in the presence of God. And Elijah puts the mantle over his face because he knows he's in the presence of God. And those two people later get to stand and bear witness to Jesus and the transfiguration. And it's so amazing that if you follow that across scripture, God's faithfulness there, that they got to come back and see the fulfillment of it all in Jesus. And the disciples that Jesus took up with him for the transfiguration, they're standing there confused and they're like, should we pitch some tents for them? Like, Moses and Elijah are here. What do we do? And Jesus is like, no, you don't understand. This is not for that. It is such a neat thing to follow scripture and see how God has had a plan from the very beginning. And that even when we don't understand things, he is in it. He cares for you. He cares for me. And I know this was a little bit of a longer video today, but I just hope that maybe if you stayed and listened through this, that God can encourage your heart through this story of Elijah and let you know that you are not alone. And don't isolate yourself, friend. If you've been struggling, don't isolate yourself. And that God, he sees you. His presence is there in the midst of the darkness. It may not take it all away. Whatever you're going through right now, it doesn't necessarily take it away. But it lets you know that you're not going through it alone. He's there. He's with you. It doesn't make it all magically better. I can't sit here and say, oh, I'm a happy, smiley person and everything's perfect, because that would be lying to you. That is the fake side, I think, of social media and Instagram and YouTube, is trying to pretend like it's all okay when it's not. So I will be the first to stand here and say it's not all okay. And life is really hard sometimes, and it doesn't always get better. That's just the truth of it. Sometimes we go through really rough seasons, and some people have seasons that last the rest of their lives. The lady that spoke at our church this week has a crippling illness that will be with her till the day of her death. It is a disability that makes her muscles deteriorate. And she was so inspiring when she said, I will not be on the other side of this, on this side of heaven. She just won't. But God has come to meet her in the midst of it. And that's just an incredible hope, isn't it? So I want you to know, if you're here today, I love you, friends. Please let me know in the comments below how I can pray for you. Maybe you don't have anybody in your corner to pray over you, and I've been trying to be a prayerful person and lift people up when I see it. And so if you'll put that down there, I will lift that up in prayer. And I just pray that God is with you today, that he's with you, that he encourages you, and that you can walk away knowing you are not alone. Love you guys. I'll see you again soon on Life in Lilacs.